The first time he said it, it was raining. Cold, needle-thin rain that soaked through my hoodie and pooled inside my sneakers as I stood in the delivery bay behind the glass tower on Madison Avenue. Midnight had already passed. The city was quieter, but never silent. Sirens in the distance, buses sighing at red lights, steam hissing from grates like the streets were breathing. "Go back to where you came from." He didn't shout. He laughed. I remember the way his umbrella tilted toward me. Expensive navy blue, the kind that snaps shut with authority. I remember the warmth behind the glass doors just 10 feet away. I remember the security camera blinking red above us, indifferent. And I remember thinking, this isn't about where I came from. It's about where he thinks I belong. The rain blurred his face, but not his smile. I was holding a clipboard. He was holding my future like it was a joke someone else had written. 6 months earlier, I had arrived in New York with 2 suitcases and a number scribbled on a coffee receipt. A friend of a friend had said, "There's work if you don't mind nights." Nights were fine. Nights didn't ask questions. I grew up in Fresno, California. Dust, heat, long roads that go nowhere fast. My mother cleaned motel rooms. My father left before I learned how to shave. Poverty wasn't dramatic where I'm from. It was practical. You learned to fold scarcity into your pocket and keep walking. New York didn't care about my background. It just charged interest. I took the delivery job because it paid cash and didn't ask for resumes. Packages in, packages out. The building was called Hale and Crown, a private equity firm that occupied 12 floors of polished arrogance. Their lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and money. That's where I met him, Evan Whitaker. He was tall in a way that had never been tested. Clean shoes, perfect hair, confidence that hadn't been earned but inherited. The kind of man who spoke around people, not to them. The first week, he barely noticed me. The second week, he noticed enough to smirk. By the third, he'd learned my name. Not because he cared, but because names make mockery more precise. "Hey, Alex," he said one night, scanning a package label. "You ever wonder how you ended up here?" I didn't answer. Silence had kept me alive longer than pride ever had. He chuckled, handed me a box like it was trash, and walked through the glass doors without looking back. That was the beginning. What he didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that I wasn't just delivering packages. I was watching. Nights give you access, days never will. People forget themselves after midnight. They talk louder. They leave doors ajar. They assume anyone holding a clipboard is invisible. I learned the rhythm of the building. Which elevators stalled, which offices stayed lit, which executives argued with their reflections after too much bourbon. And Evan liked to stay late. He liked the sound of his own voice, echoing in empty hallways. He liked reminding me, every chance he got, that I was temporary. "Guys like you," he said once, leaning against the reception desk, "you're just passing through. This place, it's not built for you." I looked at the marble floor, counted the veins in the stone, waited. He mistook patience for weakness. That's a common error. The night of the rain, he was drunk. I could smell it before he spoke. Whiskey and entitlement. He waved me over with 2 fingers like I was a waiter. "Hold this," he said, shoving his phone toward me while he fumbled with his coat. The screen lit up. Notifications stacked like dominoes, numbers, messages, names I recognized from office doors. He froze when he realized. Our eyes met. For a split second, the power shifted. Just a hairline crack in his certainty. Then he laughed, took the phone back, and said it. "Go back to where you came from." The words landed heavy, not because they were new, but because he said them like a verdict. Something inside me went quiet. I watched him walk away. Shoes splashing through puddles, umbrella spinning once before he vanished into the city. I stood there long after the rain soaked me through. Then I opened my notebook. I started writing everything down that night. Times, names, patterns. I remembered my mother's hands, raw from bleach, folding towels with military precision. I remembered her saying, "People underestimate what they don't value." Evan underestimated me. By morning, I had a plan, not revenge. Something cleaner, something inevitable. I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted him to hear himself. 2 weeks later, I was promoted. Not officially. Nothing on paper. But the head of building operations noticed that packages never went missing on my watch, that complaints disappeared, that problems got solved before they became expensive. He handed me a new badge, access to more floors. Evan didn't notice. Why would he? He still saw the hoodie, the sneakers, the pour. The night I first used my new access, the city was clear and cold. No rain, just wind funneling down avenues like a warning. I stepped into the executive floor and listened to the hum of servers behind glass walls. This was where decisions were made, where lives changed without faces attached. I wasn't supposed to be there. That had never stopped me before. I stood in the dark hallway, badge warm in my hand, and smiled for the first time since Evan learned my name. He thought the story was about where I came from. He had no idea where it was going. By the time Evan realized I existed beyond the delivery bay, I already knew his schedule better than he did. I knew which nights he stayed past midnight, pacing his office with his sleeves rolled up like he was doing something dangerous instead of just moving numbers from one column to another. I knew when he ordered takeout and pretended it was a late meeting. I knew which assistant he flirted with and which partner he feared. Most importantly, I knew what he left unlocked. People like Evan trust systems. They trust badges, cameras, titles. They don't trust people, especially not the ones they think are beneath them. That's how they sleep at night. That's how I walked through doors meant to stay closed. The executive floor smelled different. Less disinfectant, more leather and cold air. The lights were dimmed automatically after 10, but motion woke them up in soft waves as I moved. My footsteps sounded louder here, like the building itself wasn't used to being walked on by someone without a suit. I stopped outside Evan's office. Glass walls, minimalist desk, a framed photo of him on a sailboat, white shirt open at the collar, the ocean behind him like proof he belonged everywhere. I hated that picture, not because of what it showed, but because of what it didn't. I swiped my badge. The lock clicked, obedient. Inside, his office hummed with electricity, monitors asleep, a desk lamp still warm. He'd been here less than an hour. Ago. I didn't touch anything at first. I just stood there, breathing, listening to the city through the windows. Sirens far below. A helicopter chopping the air somewhere over the river. This wasn't about stealing. It was about understanding. I opened drawers slowly. Not the obvious ones, the shallow ones where people keep pens and paperweights, but the deep drawer on the right. The one people forget once they decide they're important. Inside, folders, personal, contracts, a flash drive. I didn't take them. I photographed everything with my phone, careful not to cast reflections. Names jumped out at me, shell companies, transfers that didn't make sense unless you knew what to look for. And I did. My uncle taught me numbers when I was 16. He worked nights auditing small businesses that were already half corrupt. He used to say, "Money always leaves fingerprints. You just have to know which ones are fake." Evans were all over the place. The first time I heard my voice played back to me, it wasn't mine. It was Evans. A recording from the hallway camera outside the delivery bay. Security audio wasn't supposed to be clear, but it didn't need to be. His words cut through static just fine. "Go back to where you came from." I replayed it 3 times in my apartment, a shoebox in Queens with a radiator that knocked like it was trying to escape the wall. Each time my chest tightened, not with anger, but with focus. I wasn't collecting dirt. I was collecting truth. At work, Evan started noticing changes before he noticed me. Meetings ran longer. Compliance emails showed up late at night. A partner asked him a question he wasn't ready for and smiled too politely afterward. He passed me one evening in the lobby and frowned, like he'd smelled something off. "You working up here now?" he asked. I nodded. Temporary coverage. He smirked. Figures. But his eyes lingered on my badge. That was new. I kept my head down, always polite, always invisible. That's when people talk. Two executives argued near the elevators one night, voices low but sharp. "This can't come out," one said. "It won't," the other replied. Whitaker signed off. I stepped into the elevator with them, held the door, smiled. They stopped talking. The second promotion came quietly. Access to the internal network terminals used after hours. No login credentials. Just ports left open for convenience. Convenience is another word for arrogance. I plugged in the flash drive I'd bought with 3 weeks of grocery money and watched files unfold like a map. It was worse than I thought. Evan wasn't just careless, he was greedy. He'd rerouted funds meant for employee pensions into speculative investments under a cousin's name. Legal gray areas stacked on moral black holes. People would lose everything if it collapsed. And it was already collapsing. I didn't expose him right away. That's the mistake people make. They think justice is loud, immediate. No. Justice is timing. I waited until the quarterly review. Until auditors were already circling. Until the firm's reputation was a glass tower with hairline fractures running through it. Then I sent one email. Anonymous, concise, documented. Subject line, internal risk assessment. Immediate review required. I CC'd the right people, and I attached Evan's fingerprints. The building felt different the next morning. Quieter, tighter, like everyone was holding their breath without knowing why. Evan stormed past me in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, face flushed. "No, that's impossible," he snapped. "That access doesn't exist." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. For the first time, he really looked. Not the hoodie, not the sneakers. Me. His eyes narrowed. Something clicked. I met his gaze and nodded. Just once. Not a threat. A reminder. That night, I stood on the roof during my break, wind cutting through my jacket. The city spread out like a living thing beneath me, lights blinking, lives colliding. I thought about Fresno, about my mother, about all the places people tell you to go back to when they don't want to see you standing where you are. Evan thought power was permanent. He was wrong. Power is borrowed, and I was done being invisible. The first thing that broke wasn't Evan. It was the silence around him. By Wednesday, the elevators stopped laughing. By Thursday, doors closed a little faster when he walked by. On Friday morning, the compliance team arrived in pairs instead of singles, carrying tablets instead of coffee. I watched it all from my usual places. Corners, hallways, the edges of rooms where people forget someone is listening. Evan still wore the same suits, still spoke with the same certainty. But something underneath had shifted, like a building settling after a bad foundation finally gives way. He started staying later. So did I. There's a moment, right before something collapses, when the people inside pretend it's just a draft, a minor inconvenience, a rumor. They tighten their grip on a routine like muscle memory will save them. Evan leaned into that instinct. He called meetings, sent emails full of confident verbs, laughed a little too loudly in conference rooms with glass walls. But his eyes betrayed him. They darted now, checked reflections in dark monitors, looked over shoulders that had never needed watching. One night, close to 1 a.m, he cornered me near the loading dock. Not the public one, the side entrance reserved for contractors and forgotten things. "Alex," he said, voice calm, hands in his pockets. "You've been around a lot lately." I shrugged. "Just doing my job." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny. I don't remember approving access for delivery staff upstairs." Must have been an oversight. He stepped closer. I could smell his cologne fighting with stress. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "People like us, we don't need problems. We need discretion. People like us." The phrase hung there, heavy and false. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. He studied my face, searching for something. Fear, arrogance, guilt. He found none. That's when his expression hardened. "Be careful," he said. "You don't want to end up back where you started." I met his gaze, held it. "Neither do you." I walked past him before he could respond. That night, the auditors found the second layer. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it the next morning in the break room. Two assistants whispering over burnt coffee, voices tight. "They found transfers," one said. "Real ones?" "Enough." Evan didn't come in until noon. When he did, the building seemed to lean away from him. I kept thinking about my mother that week, about the way she used to sit at the kitchen table after double shifts, counting tips, smoothing wrinkled bills with her thumbs like she could iron the worry out of them. About how she never complained, never asked why things were harder for us. She used to say, "Some people are born on third base and think they hit a triple." Evan thought he'd built something. He'd just been standing on it. The call came Friday evening. Not to my phone, to the desk phone at the security office where I was covering a late shift. "Alex," the head of operations said, voice low. "I need you upstairs, executive floor." I took the stairs. Elevators leave records. Evan's office door was open. Inside, the lights were harsh. Two partners stood near the window, arms crossed. A woman from legal sat at the desk, scrolling through documents with surgical calm. Evan was seated, jacket off, tie loosened, hands flat on the table like he was trying to keep himself from floating away. He looked up when I entered. For a second, something close to disbelief crossed his face. "You," he said. The woman from legal glanced at him. "You know him?" Evan swallowed. "He's staff." "Was," she corrected. "Effective today, his position has changed." She turned to me. "You'll assist with access logs and after-hours records. You're familiar with the systems." I nodded. Evan laughed once, sharp and humorless. "This is a joke." No one joined him. I stood by the wall as they laid it out. Irregularities, breach of fiduciary duty, pending investigation, temporary suspension of authority. Temporary is what they say when permanence scares them. Evan argued, deflected, blamed subordinates who weren't there to defend themselves. Then, finally, his eyes found me again. "You did this," he said, voice cracking just enough to show the truth underneath. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. After they left, he stayed seated. The city outside his window glowed gold and cold, indifferent as ever. "Why?" he asked quietly. I considered him for a moment. The man who'd laughed in the rain, who'd told me to go back to where I came from like it was a command. "Because you thought no one was watching," I said. "And because you thought I didn't matter." He shook his head. "You could have asked. People like me. We help when, asked." I almost smiled. "No," I said. "People like you help when it benefits you." Silence settled between us, heavy, final. By Monday, his name was gone from the directory. By Wednesday, his office was empty. By Friday, no one said it out loud, but everyone knew. Evan Whitaker was finished. I walked out of the building that night into clear air, the city buzzing like nothing had happened. Because to the city, nothing had. Lives reset every second here. Winners fade. New names rise. I stood on the sidewalk, listening to traffic, feeling something unexpected loosen in my chest. Not triumph, relief, but deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. People like Evan don't disappear quietly, and people like me don't walk away untouched. The rain started again, light this time, almost polite. I pulled my hood up and stepped into it. Evan didn't vanish. People like him never do. They just change altitude. The first sign was an email forwarded to me by someone in compliance. No message, just the attachment. A legal notice. Not a lawsuit yet. A preliminary inquiry. Evan's name sat at the top like it still belonged there. He was pushing back. Of course he was. My new role came with a temporary title and permanent tension. I wasn't delivery anymore. I wasn't executive either. I existed in the space between, trusted enough to access records, invisible enough to take the heat if something went wrong. That's where the truth lives. The building treated me differently now. People nodded. Some smiled. Others avoided eye contact, like proximity might be contagious. Power does that. It rearranges manners. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't trust it. 3 nights after Evan was suspended, I found my apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing. That's how I knew it was intentional. I stood in the doorway, heart steady, scanning details. The chair slightly angled. The notebook on my desk moved an inch to the left. The window still locked. A message without words. I was here. I locked the door, sat on the edge of my bed, and waited for the fear to arrive. It didn't. What came instead was memory, the rain, the laugh, the words. Go back to where you came from. I pulled my notebook from the drawer and added a new page. Evan reached out 2 days later. Not directly. A mutual contact, one of the junior partners who still thought loyalty was a currency, cornered me near the elevators. He wants to talk, the partner said, voice low. Just clear the air. I almost said no. Almost. But stories don't end when you want them to. They end when they're finished. We met at a bar near Union Square, the kind with dim lights and sticky floors, pretending to be gritty while charging $16 for whiskey. Evan was already there, nursing a drink like it had betrayed him. He looked different. Same suit, same haircut, less gravity. Alex, he said, standing too fast. Thanks for coming. I sat across from him, didn't order anything. Say what you need to say. He sighed, rubbing his face. You blindsided me. You underestimated me. He flinched, just a fraction. I lost everything, he said. My position, my reputation. People won't even take my calls. I watched him carefully, the way his fingers tapped the glass, the way his eyes searched for sympathy like it was owed. You rerouted pension funds, I said. People almost lost their retirements. He waved it off. It was temporary. Everyone does it. No, I said. Everyone doesn't. Silence stretched. Then his mouth twisted into something ugly. You think you're better than me now? He asked. You think this changes where you came from? There it was, raw, unfiltered. I leaned forward. This changes who you get to look down on. His jaw tightened. You don't belong in that world. Neither do you, I said calmly. You just convince people otherwise for a while. He laughed, but there was panic under it. Enjoy it while it lasts. People like you fall harder. I stood. Maybe, but I won't pretend the fall was, someone else's fault. I left him there, staring into his glass like it might explain where he went wrong. The retaliation started subtle. A missing file, an access log flagged for review, an anonymous complaint about my credentials. Nothing stuck. I'd learned from Evan's mistakes. Documentation is armor. One night as I was leaving the building, I noticed the security camera over the delivery bay blinking red, still watching, always watching. I stopped under it and looked up. For a second I imagined Evan somewhere behind a screen, replaying old footage, trying to remember the moment everything slipped through his fingers. I hoped he did. Weeks passed. The investigation widened. More names surfaced. Evans wasn't the only one. That's the thing about pulling one loose thread. It rarely belongs to just one person. I was offered a permanent position. Compliance analytics, salary, benefits, stability. I thought about Fresno, about my mother, about all the places people tell you not to, dream too big. I accepted. On my first official day, I walked past the delivery bay without stopping. The rain was gone. The concrete was dry. But the echo of his voice lingered, like a scar you only feel when the weather changes. Go back to where you came from. I smiled to myself. I had, and I'd brought the truth with me. But somewhere in the city, Evan was still breathing, still angry, still convinced the story owed him a different ending. And I knew, deep in my bones, that he wouldn't be the last man to test how far I could be pushed. This was no longer about him. It was about what happens when the invisible stops staying quiet. Power changes the way rooms sound. I noticed it the first week in my new role. Conversations dipped when I walked by, then resumed with forced normalcy. Laughter landed half a second late. People measured their words like they were afraid I might invoice them for honesty. I hadn't asked for that, but I understood it. Visibility is expensive. Someone always sends you the bill. The email arrived on a Tuesday night, just after 10. No subject line, no signature. You think you won. You don't even know the game. I stared at the screen in my apartment, the radiator ticking like a countdown. For a moment, I considered deleting it, pretending it was spam, noise. I didn't. Instead, I saved it, tagged it, logged the IP. Fear used to make me freeze. Now it made me precise. At work, the investigation metastasized. What started as a single executive's misconduct unraveled into a network. Quiet agreements, mutual blind spots, favors repaid in silence. The firm hired an outside consultancy to restore confidence, which was just another way of saying, contain the damage. I became useful, dangerously so. People asked for my opinion in meetings where I used to serve coffee. They waited for my nod before approving access requests. My calendar filled weeks in advance, and every night when I left the building, I felt eyes on my back. Not Evan's, others. The second message came 3 days later. This time it included a photo, my apartment building, taken from across the street, time-stamped. I didn't call the police. I called my mother. We talked about nothing important. The weather, a neighbor's new dog. She asked if I was eating enough. I told her I was fine. Before we hung up, she said, "You sound tired." "I am," I admitted. She paused. Being right doesn't always feel good, but it's still better than being quiet. I sat with that, long after the call ended. I tightened my routines, varied routes home, different subway cars. I stopped wearing headphones at night. Awareness became muscle memory. At work, I requested additional logs, not because I needed them, but because people with something to hide hate unpredictability. It worked. By Friday, someone slipped. A mid-level director flagged a file he shouldn't have known about. A conversation ended too abruptly when I entered the room. Patterns emerged, and one name kept. Circling the edges. Not Evan. Someone higher. The meeting was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. Voluntary attendance. Those are never voluntary. The conference room windows reflected a gray dawn. Coffee steamed untouched. No one joked. As the consultant spoke about organizational integrity, I watched faces instead of slides. The tension wasn't fear, it was calculation. Who would be sacrificed to save the rest? I already knew the answer. They needed a boundary, a signal. They needed me. The offer came. That afternoon. A promotion, real this time. More money than I'd ever made. A title that implied trust and required silence. All I had to do was narrow my focus, stick to the original scope, let certain threads go. This is how institutions survive, the partner said gently, like explaining gravity to a child. I asked for the weekend to think. He smiled, relieved. Of course. That night, I walked the city until my legs ached. I crossed bridges, watched lights ripple on dark water, thought about Evan, about how small he seemed now that he'd been exposed, about how easy it would be to become a different version of him, with better manners and cleaner paperwork. The city didn't care which choice I made, but I would. Sunday evening, the third message arrived. No threats this time, just a sentence. They'll use you until they don't need you anymore. I closed my eyes, exhaled. Then I opened my notebook and wrote until my hand cramped. Monday morning, I gave them my answer. I accepted the promotion, and I forwarded a folder. Every thread, every name, every pattern they'd hoped I'd miss. I watched the partner's smile falter as his inbox filled. "This goes beyond scope," he said carefully. "So does corruption," I replied. Silence swallowed the room. By Wednesday, the board was involved. By Thursday, lawyers were everywhere. By Friday, my badge stopped working. Administrative leave. Paid. Temporary. I laughed when I read the email. Temporary is what they say when permanent scares them. That night, I sat by my window, city humming below, and felt the weight of it all finally settle in. I might lose everything. Again. But this time, it wouldn't be because I believed I didn't belong. Somewhere in the city, Evan was probably watching the news, feeling vindicated. He was wrong. This wasn't my fall. It was the price of standing where I chose to stand, and I was ready to pay it. Administrative leave feels like exile with benefits. No badge, no building, no meetings disguised as morality. Just an inbox that stayed quiet and days that stretched too long. I slept late, walked more, listened to the city like it might tell me what came next. It didn't. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Not with my name, never with my name, but with enough detail that anyone inside the industry knew what had happened. An internal investigation, multiple executives placed on leave, a board reshuffle. Words like systemic failure and cultural blind spots floated across screens like apologies that had learned to speak corporate. Evan's name appeared once, buried, small. I felt nothing when I saw it. That surprised me. They called me back 2 weeks later, not to return, never that, but to close the loop. A glass conference room in a different building, neutral territory. 3 people I didn't know and 1 I did. The woman from legal, eyes sharp, voice steady. "You did the right thing," she said, like it was a conclusion, not an opinion. I nodded. Right doesn't pay rent. Right doesn't guarantee safety. "We're offering a severance," another voice added, "and a recommendation. A clean exit, a way to disappear gracefully." I thought about the delivery bay, the rain, the laugh, the words that had tried to put me back in my place. "Go back to where you came from." "I'll take it," I said. They looked relieved. My last day in the city came quietly. I packed my apartment at dawn, the sky still bruised from night. I left the notebook on the desk for a long moment before sliding it into my bag. Some things you don't throw away. You just stop needing to open them. I walked past my building, past the subway entrance, and didn't look back. At the station, a man in a suit shoved past me, muttering under his breath. The platform smelled like metal and electricity. Trains roared in, then out, carrying other people's endings and beginnings. I smiled. I didn't go back to Fresno. Not because there was anything wrong with it, but because I wasn't running anymore. I took a job with a firm that audits nonprofits. Less money, more purpose. Offices with peeling paint and people who argued about outcomes instead of optics. On my first day, someone asked where I was from. I told them the truth. "Everywhere," I said, "and here." Sometimes late at night, I still hear his voice. Not loud, not angry, just certain. "Go back to where you came from." I think about how close I came to believing him, how easy it would have been to stay invisible, to accept the boundaries other people draw for you, and call it survival. But survival isn't the same as living, and power, real power, doesn't laugh in the rain. It listens, it watches, it remembers. I stand where I choose now, not above anyone, not beneath, just present. And if someone ever tells me to go back to where I came from again, I'll know exactly what to say. I never left. The story people tell about moments like this is always cleaner than the truth. They say it ends with justice, with applause, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing you were right all along. That's not how it felt. What I felt, weeks later, sitting alone in a borrowed office with flickering lights and a view of a brick wall, was something closer to balance. Not happiness, not victory. Balance. The city released me slowly. At first, it showed up in small ways. I stopped flinching when unknown numbers lit up my phone. I slept through the night without replaying conversations in my head. I walked into rooms without scanning for exits. The noise faded. And in the quiet, I finally heard myself again. Evan tried once more. A message, months later, routed through a lawyer this time. Carefully worded, polished, a request for mediation. Closure, as if what he wanted was peace and not revision. I read it once, then I deleted it. Some people don't want forgiveness. They want permission to forget. I wasn't going to give him that. My work now is slower. No glass towers, no security cameras blinking red above my head. Just files that matter and people who know exactly why they're tired. I sit across from accountants who volunteer on weekends, from directors who worry about outcomes instead of headlines, from interns who ask questions because they actually want the answers. They don't know my story, and that feels right. Every so often, someone recognizes my name. LinkedIn has a long memory. They ask careful questions. They imply opportunities, bigger roles, better pay, a chance to get back into the game. I always smile. I never left, I tell them. I just changed fields. They don't always understand, but I do. I went back to New York once, just for a day. I walked past the old building on Madison Avenue, stood across the street where the rain had soaked through my shoes that night. The glass still shone. People still rushed in and out, clutching coffee and confidence like armor. The delivery bay was empty. For a moment I saw myself there, hood up, clipboard in hand, invisible and absorbing every word thrown my way like it was a verdict. Then the light changed, and the reflection vanished. The thing no one tells you about being underestimated is how much clarity it gives you. When people show you exactly who they think you are, they also show you exactly who they are. Evan thought money was lineage, that power was a birthright, that people without it were temporary obstacles in a permanent world. He was wrong. Power is fragile. Character isn't. I still carry the notebook. I don't write in it anymore. But I keep it close, not as a weapon, not as evidence, but as a reminder of where silence leads, of how easily cruelty disguises itself as confidence, and of what happens when someone decides they're done shrinking. If this were a different kind of story, I'd tell you it ends with certainty. It doesn't. It ends with choice. With waking up every day and deciding, again, where I stand, what I tolerate, and who I refuse to become. The world will always have men like Evan, arrogant, loud, certain they own the ground beneath their feet. What changes things is whether the rest of us keep believing them. I don't. Not anymore. I came from nowhere they respected, and I built somewhere they couldn't control. That's what remains.